Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. We are proud members of the Activist Post Podcast Network, so you can check out all of our audio archives at activistpost.com. Well, it's Monday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time, and we are actually coming to you from a number of places today. I'm in New Hampshire, live free or die. My co-host is in fabulous Las Vegas, and our guest today is, I believe, down in South Florida. And our guest today is Chris DeRose, who, if you don't already know who he is, you are really, really going to enjoy this. He and I have had some back and forths on Twitter. I was recently on his show, one of the most insightful and introspective individuals in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Not only is he technically savvy, but he's incredibly well-read, understands the historical context of where we're at, is a philosopher, a writer. So really someone who's right up my alley in terms of his views and how he comes at things, and particularly his views on how important the blockchain is, how important Bitcoin is in particular to the future. So we're going to talk a little bit about my move. As some of you know, I just came back, or just got to New Hampshire. I've officially moved from Las Vegas. We're going to talk a little bit about that, talk about what you can expect in this show upcoming, and then, of course, in the second hour, we're going to speak with our guest, Chris DeRose. So to help me get through all of that, as always, my good friend, co-host and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian!
Good morning, Vin.
Christian, this is... People are probably like, wait a minute. Isn't this the exact same studio setup?
Right?
Like, aren't they in the studio right now? No, we're not. No.
Nope.
No. Miracle of modern technology.
Seriously,
But it's a
dude,
good
it's
place
crazy.
it's a good place to start, though, I think. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really good place to start. So I figured what we would do is we would just, even though we're a continent apart, for us to be able to sort of recreate our being, 10 feet apart, that I think that's a good starting place. And then we're going to explore, man. We're going to explore. You know, it's like, I already feel that, and I guess some people, you don't realize it when you're inside of it, but when we started out doing the show, we really were doing some things that most people were not doing in terms
Right.
of like the multi-camera, that like with the backgrounds going in all of these different ways, and the titling, and something very rare for just two guys to sit down and do themselves, you know, with no
hmm
staff and none of that, no budget. And in this case, it's like we're pushing the technology even further. So
Right.
that's good. And I think that it's a...
And
Go ahead.
if it fits the show perfectly, you
Well,
know?
yeah, of course. So that gets us, though, to our guest, Chris DeRose, who it fits with him as well, with the technology
hmm
being what it is. I mean, he's technically savvy, which is something that I like in this particular space. He's somebody who's been around Bitcoin for a very, very long time, and he and I have been two of the individuals who are talking about Bitcoin as religion, and
Right.
it's a controversial topic. It's something that I went on his show and I talked about, that we're really looking at like a broader and bigger sociological situation that's happening. And I wanted to have him on to start that out, because like that's something it's something that's been on my mind, and especially with the move, man, it makes
hmm
I'll tell you this. I came here, and as you know, like I came here because this was the place where liberty was happening on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's just a totally different experience being here. And I think that what we're going to end up with the show being over time is more about what's happening here as opposed to broadly. And very much, it's
Gotcha.
become a crypto based show for the most part. I think it's
hmm
going to stay there because, you know, I've now come to, after how long have we been doing this show? Almost, well, a year and a half at
Almost.
least, right?
Yeah.
Almost 2 years. And this is this is the concrete thing that can be done, is moving into the crypto economy. Wrote about it in my book, Self Ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Coined the term crypto savage, right? And that's really the key of this whole, really, I think, of this whole movement at this point, is up until now you've had a liberty movement that has been very much about the philosophical.
Right.
Some of it about, in a few places where it could actually happen, some of it about the political, like in New Hampshire, getting people elected to office. But even that is slow going, and it's 15 years on, right? But this is something that everybody can do on the most basic, like person-to-person, hand-to-hand level, just to move to crypto, to start at every step when you can, paying for things in crypto, earning in crypto. That over time is something that, one, it's a revolution of one. Because if you can get yourself to a place where you're only operating in cryptocurrency, you're there. Like, you're there.
Right.
Without getting anybody to do anything else, you're there.
Let's explore that a little bit, because I know moving to New Hampshire is something that happens in the physical reality. So you actually have to physically move to New Hampshire.
Yep.
But let's talk about your thought process when you move in more into freedom. Like, what are the first couple steps, that the, let's just say, layman can take to increase their freedom? Because I really believe it starts there, like your thought process. What are the first seriously important thoughts that you should start exploring?
Well, dude, taxation is theft, right?
Right.
But not as a slogan. Not as a slogan. I think more important to that saying is not the fact that taxation is theft. What's more important to that saying is the realization that we live in a society that is not finished. That's very, very important. Like, that history is not over. It's not the end of history. And that throughout history, there have been cultural and political institutions that have turned out to be, that everybody now sees as immoral. Okay? So, like, let's take a few examples. Slavery is one of the biggest examples.
Yeah.
Slavery, in terms of the human experience, some form of slavery was really universal throughout every culture. Every culture. It's like, even amongst the noble savages or whatever, even when the sort of conquistadors and the colonists and all of them, when they came to the Americas and they encountered these people who hadn't really encountered white people, and even as they got further in, slavery was throughout. It wasn't always like chattel slavery where they were like selling people or whatever, but if you captured someone in battle, you could basically enslave them as a sort of a lower class member of your tribe who you could force them to work for you, either work for me or I'm going to kill you. So that notion is a really, really old notion for human beings.
Right.
And yet now we look at that in modern society and everybody's like, oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're just not going to do that. So it's these sorts of examples. I mean, there are tons of other examples. I think, we're reaching a place now when it's like the idea of like beating your wife or beating your children. In many cultures, the idea that a man had a right to beat his wife or to beat his children. These things have only gone away in the last maybe 200 years, maybe.
Right.
And not even in every culture. So it's that realization, I think, and that's what taxation is theft. That's what this idea, that's what the idea is. That's what we're trying to get at with that, is to say, listen, we've walked down this path of civilization for the last, let's say we've walked down it for 10,000 years, but as human beings, let's say we've had the human experience, let's say we've had it for 250,000 to a million years.
Right.
Speech. I just learned this, and it blew my mind when I learned this. Speech, the spoken word as language, not like grunts and shit, not just
Yeah.
like maybe one thing, but actually to string together a series of words into sentences like we're doing now, so that I can transmit what's in my head into your head.
Ideas.
That's like less than 50,000 years old.
Holy shit.
It may be as recent as 35,000 years ago. But the people
Wow.
who were like 70,000 years ago are genetically pretty much identical to us. It's not like
Hmm.
we've evolved over some long, like over that period of time, we haven't evolved significantly more. Like our brains are, you could take somebody born then, in other words,
Hmm.
bring them in a time machine to now as a baby, raise
Hmm.
them up, and there would be no way to tell. You could put them in a lineup of people, no way to tell
Hmm.
that they were born 70,000 years ago. But if we were born 70,000 years ago, we wouldn't even speak.
Crazy. That's crazy.
It's a technology.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Technology.
Speech itself is a
Hmm.
technology. And it's like,
And
go ahead.
what's interesting too is freedom is a technology as well.
Yes,
Freedom is
yes.
a science and a technology. So like, let's go back to the idea that taxation is theft and that slavery is wrong.
Right.
Well, technically speaking, if you really look at it, if you're paying taxes, you are a slave in a sense,
No,
and
not in a sense. You're not a slave in a sense. You
you
are
are a
a
slave.
slave.
Right,
If
right.
somebody
So,
says to you, do this work, and it doesn't matter if you press it off over time, right? So it's like, it doesn't matter if it's the labor itself or the fruits of the labor, right? So it doesn't matter if they say, oh, cook this food, and then they take the food, or they say, grow this food, and then they just take all the fucking food. It doesn't matter whether it's the labor or it's the fruits of the labor. If
mhm,
someone says, either do this or I kill you, you're a slave. Or I beat you, or I
yeah.
kidnap you
Or
and
I
throw
put
you
you
in
in
a
a
cage.
cage, or yeah. Well, so okay, so taxation is theft and slavery, and we all believe that slavery is wrong. But the problem that we're looking at right now in society is that it's so covert, and people have this wool over their eyes that oh, the roads or build, all that stuff. So how do we actually get to the point where we start to break those chains? Like how we start to realize that and understand the truth behind that thought and not see it as like this programming.
Well, I think, look, dude, this is, for me, this is a spiritual, I've said this.
Right.
We've talked about this a lot, right?
Hmm.
To me, this is a spiritual movement. And I do believe that this entire idea has to begin, has to begin inside and in the spirit and in the emotional space.
Hmm.
It has to begin in the emotional space. And this is why so my book, Self Ownership, this is why I begin that book with this first chapter that says, look, this is about preferences, basically. It's called a concession. It says the
Hmm.
concession is, throughout history, all these different types of organization, they've all worked, but do we prefer? Which do you prefer? Do you prefer to live in a world that has more violence or less violence? Which one is going to be more prosperous? What do you prefer? And
Yeah.
and so in order for you to manage your preferences, that's a spiritual pursuit. And I know for me, so if we're going to talk about like, I'm teaching this coding class, right? This we just got
Hmm.
done with our second seminar. It's Code from Go. But this is true with teaching I think anybody anything that, especially when you're somebody who's self-taught and you go to try to teach someone something, you actually have to like step back into the mode of like, where was I at? How did I come to this realization? What were the steps that I took, right? You have to embody it first, walk through it again, and then
Hmm.
articulate it. And I had to do the same thing in going back and seeing, well, how did I learn, how did I teach myself to code? It's the same way. I know that for
Right.
me, the experiences that I had, and it's why I talk a lot about psychedelics, I think that they're going to be very important to the time that we're in. Very important to the time that we're in, especially if you're going to be a crypto savage. Like, honestly, if you're going to be involved with cryptocurrency and the blockchain, you have to understand how crazy, how truly, like, we talked about speech as a technology. That's so crazy. Like, step back.
Hmm.
We do it every day, so it's no problem. But step back and think about what we're talking about. What we're talking about is mouth noises.
Hmm.
Mouth noises. But there's a consensual hallucination. It is a hallucination, dude, because you aren't even hearing the words that I'm saying. You're not hearing the words. You're hearing the meaning of the entire thing that
The
I'm
energy
stringing
behind it.
together. You
Yeah,
understand what I'm saying? How deep of a fucking technology that is?
it's crazy.
When I say think of a pink elephant, a picture pops into
Hmm.
your head that has absolutely nothing to do with the noise pink elephant. That is an
Right.
arbitrary noise being made by my mouth that is being converted into an image in your head. That's fucking crazy.
Right. And that's actually it's interesting because right before you said that, I was thinking the reason why I wanted to discuss this a little bit is because there's a lot of new people coming on the show and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and to go over even these basic core principles, but to backwards engineer them to understand them at its core deep at its deep levels is what's required to actually move through this process, you know.
Well,
So even though it's basic stuff.
so it's not what to do, right? It's more about who to be.
Yeah.
Who who to be and why. Right? So that's really what it comes down to. For coming to New Hampshire, there's two aspects of it that are great. Well, there's two aspects. One is great, one is potentially how would I put it? One is potentially makes things more difficult. What's obviously what makes it great is that there's a lot of like-minded people who, when I say taxation is theft, they feel it. There's no
Right.
explanation. You're speaking the same language. You've got the same vocabulary. That speeds, when you speak the same language as somebody, the shit that you're able to get done is obviously a lot more. That's the story of the Tower of Babel in the Bible, right? That the
Hmm.
idea is, oh, you want them to stop building? Just make them all speak a different language, and they'll stop building, right? They'll
Right.
get after each other immediately. But that's good. So that's good. But at the same time, you're also all on the same page, so you're all inside of it. So you can often get caught up, and when you're inside of a milieu, you can think that the whole world is that way, that the whole world thinks the way that you think, and that's just simply not the case, right? The whole world
Gotcha.
does not think this way.
Got
We
kicked off.
You got disconnected, dude. So we should explain before we do this. We should explain because we have this new setup in terms of the technology. We should explain what people are seeing right now, right? Because I'm sure the people who are really paying attention, if they've got a high quality enough, they're like, it looks a little different. Like, did they change the cameras? Like,
Right.
what are they doing? Okay, so here's the deal. I am in New Hampshire. I am in my studio. Christian is in Las Vegas. He is in his studio. Christian is on Skype right now, which the quality, by the way, is fantastic. He's controlling the machine here through a remote desktop, which just disconnected, and I'm sending him over the new code. This is crazy. Miracle of modern technology, right? And then we both have green screens going, and we have the old backgrounds of the studio.
Dude, it's crazy. I'm looking at it on YouTube at the moment, and it looks identical.
It looks the
It,
same.
yeah, it's trippy.
Well, dude, we're gonna get it like even more adjusted, so it's even tighter. But I just throughout the show, from time to time, if I'm not paying attention, it may be that I have to reconnect Christian so that
There
he's
we go.
got the he's got the power. I see you moving the mouse around. This to me, so this goes to it about the technology and about where we're at, right? Is that it's more about who you have to be, and it's one reason why for me self-sufficiency, and I'm going away from self-sufficiency now, right? Because I think
Hmm.
that it's part of a broader concept. And so it's like, I love the people in the sort of, whether you call it survivalist, prepper, whatever, the self sufficiency community, people like Jack
Yeah.
Spirko, who's become a good friend now over the years of doing this and a mentor in many ways as well. But, and others, and a lot of people come to the show this way. It's not self sufficiency. This is not the broader concept. The broader concept is sovereignty.
Ah.
Sovereignty. So the sovereign, when you talk about the sovereign is the person that who does not have to answer to anyone else. In other words, the
Hmm.
buck stops here. The sovereign can do whatever the sovereign wants to do, until unless and until somebody tries to what is it? Usurp their power, like to kill the king or whatever it is, to
Yeah.
take power. But the more established monarchies, like I was watching that show, The Crown. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about Queen Elizabeth. It's really interesting. It's I think it's a Netflix. It might be a Netflix
I
series.
haven't seen it yet.
It's interesting. It gets kind of stupid as it goes forward, but watch like the first season is pretty cool because it gets into like the fact that even the queen is, she's really a slave in many ways to this
Hmm.
broader system. You know, that she's playing the role of the sovereign, that even she has to ask permission, like that there's a broader system. And that's where this whole thing falls apart is that what we're really after, what liberty is really about sovereignty. It's about I don't have to ask permission to do things that don't hurt other people.
Hmm.
Neither do you. Okay, now let's negotiate a society based on that basic rule. And I think that that's the way that you sell it to people is that, well, it's going to go one way or the other. Either they're going to be like, yes, that sounds good,
Hmm.
and or they don't want it. They don't want that responsibility.
Hmm.
They don't want to really be the one who's in control over what they do. They don't want to.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this a very similar concept years ago. I was thinking about after watching the movie The Matrix and
Mm.
and looking at society and stuff like that, and realizing that it's really there and it's really like that. But I also realized that The Matrix, in a sense, for some people, not for all, I think what distinguishes it is the level of consciousness.
Mm.
But for some people, it's a protective mechanism. It actually works to protect them.
You're
The
saying the
difference,
Matrix that we're living in, not the Matrix the movie, but the Matrix that we're living
right?
in.
Exactly,
Well, isn't there
exactly.
the guy who wants to go Cipher, right? He wants to go, which is interesting that he's named Cipher, right? So for the code, he wants to go back in,
Yeah.
right? He wants to get put back into the Matrix. The question is, well, no. They tell him you can't go back into the Matrix, and in some ways you really can't, because the
Once you,
Matrix requires ignorance. Once you're
right.
no longer ignorant, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, it's not going to work. And I think that what determines that is the levels of consciousness. So, in other words, this thing is not a one size fits all thing. Like the way that we have it structured
Mm.
now in society with politics and all that stuff, it's a one size fits all. And where we're at now with consciousness is like, no, it's not like that. It doesn't fit for everybody. And it comes down to being a voluntary thing, but for some people they want that, and I've had conversations with people and I tried to understand them from that level, like why would you want something like this, and they're like, well, I feel protected there.
Mm.
And then on the other side, people do not want that, but the problem that we face right now is that it's there for everybody, like it's a one size fits all thing, and it definitely doesn't go, it's definitely not designed like that.
Well, you can't. See, and that's the whole thing. Like, you can't systematize a series of rules about how people should live their life. Because,
Yeah.
especially at this point, like, perhaps you could 2,000 years ago, because there
Mhm.
really weren't all that many different ways that you could live your life, right? There were like 10 professions, you know, everybody wore the same clothes.
Yeah, yeah.
But as technology moves forward, you get all this variety. And the market is naturally wanting to put that variety and wanting to put that competition, to always be searching for the next thing, to always evolve. And, I'm even, I've become frustrated with, I love Jordan Peterson, but I've become
Hmm.
frustrated lately, like I've been following how this whole thing has sort of evolved with, and it's really like, they call it the intellectual dark web, but
Right.
they did a story in the New York Times recently about it, but it's really Dave Rubin's cool cocktail party friends. Like, that's really
Mhm.
what it is. It's Dave Rubin. He's got a bunch of cool friends that he likes to have drinks with, and they go and they do these talks, and there's not really, you can't really use the information except for one guy, Jordan Peterson, whose
Mhm.
information you can actually use. But when he goes off into other things about postmodernists wanting to do this, and it really misses the whole entire point, and that's what the media focuses on, because his whole point is take responsibility for the things that happen in your life. It's your life. Take responsibility. Now, this is the message of every single sage throughout
Yeah.
history. Whether it's Christ, whether it's Buddha, whether it's Muhammad, like, it doesn't matter. This is the spiritual message. The spiritual message is take responsibility for the things that happen in your life. Okay, so what is the extension out of that? It is to say that you need to start making decisions for yourself, for your own best interest and the best interest of others around you.
Hmm.
And with things moving and evolving so fast, with history like on the march, dude, in a big way, that's going to change. Like, who you are and what you believe 5 years from now should be different. What you understand about the world should be different if you're paying attention at all.
Oh, even daily, especially with the information that's being passed around right now through social media and stuff like that. Like, one of the things that I was looking at recently, well, I've been looking at it for a few years now, but recently deeper, was the belief systems and how rapidly belief systems can actually change, because the information is being moved along so quickly, and that can be obviously a good or a bad thing. But where was I going with
Well,
this?
here's the question, though. Here's the question. Let me just interrupt you on that because it's an
Mhm.
interesting way to go. But then what do you say and who do you have to be in order to accept the fact that, oh, my belief system is going to change at some
Right.
point here, and to know when that moment is, right? Because you clearly don't want to change your entire way that you think about the entire world. You don't want to change that on a whim. But
Hmm.
you also don't want to be so static that, given information that blows apart your old belief system, you stick with that old belief
Yeah.
system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even no longer being ignorant, but then you stick with it, right? Which is, we started this show um, with the Trump about to be elected, and or the with the run up to the 2016 election. Now you see people who Trump is just, doing the same old thing, and in some ways he's been worse, in some ways he's
Mhm.
been better, but state is gonna state, man,
Same shit.
like from
Yeah.
the beginning. That's why I was like, no, it doesn't matter. You're gonna get the same guy. Like, state is gonna state, but you still see it's so weird to me, and I'm like, who are these people who are still like MAGA hashtags in their online
Mhm.
profiles, just defending Trump left and right? And I'm like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? What benefit do you draw from this? Well, number one, you're wrong. Number
Mhm.
one, you're wrong. Like, he's not some savior. He's not done anything really significant. And if anything, like he's distracting. He
Yeah,
distracts people.
he's a perfect distraction.
And the country is more fractured than it's ever been. You know, everything is about Trump. Everything is fucking about Trump. You know?
Uh, well, I think because they're relying on an outside force instead of an
There.
internal
That's it.
force. You know what I
That's
mean?
the
So
answer.
like they think, oh, Trump's going to come into office and everything's going to change. Like, no, everything's going to stay the same. And the only thing that could possibly change to make things better for you, anyways, is you. When you
Right.
change, then everything else outside will change.
So this is so now this carries forward, right? This takes it to the next step. Is that when you become someone who your goal is to grow as a human being, the most important thing to you becomes not having barriers placed in your way in terms of your personal development,
Yeah.
right? So this is actually the reason why, for instance, there's a problem with discrimination. Discriminating against people, for instance, based on their race, based on their gender, putting
Hmm.
up these blocks that are there in terms of their personal development as a soul, that blocks are being put up that should not even be there, and it doesn't enable them to become the best person that they could be. Why is that a societal problem? The reason that's a societal problem is you don't know how good they might become, and by them becoming good might just be the thing that saves us all, right?
Right,
You
exactly.
don't know how important their particular life could possibly be. You just don't know. They could have the cure for cancer. They could fix climate change. Like, you don't know. So that's what it's about having a society where everyone has sovereignty. The positive is you get the best possible people that you could possibly have, right? That's the positive. You got somebody blowing leaves?
I think I lost your sound.
No, I've got you. Do you have someone blowing leaves
Okay.
in the background?
Yeah, I was trying to mute myself because they're cutting the grass or some shit out there.
Dude, so we went from industrial
Oh my
sounds.
God.
We went from industrial sounds to residential sounds now.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You can't mute yourself? Try it. Hit the little mute button. Oh, yep, you're muted. You're muted.
There we go. The button on the mic is a little touchy, so
Okay,
but
yes.
I think he'll be gone in a couple
Dude,
minutes.
it's all good. It's super, but this is it. It's getting to a place which brings me to New Hampshire,
Hmm.
right? For me, this is where I've come to in terms of my understanding of what the move for libertarians is supposed to be. And this is my next book is Render Unto Caesar, and this is basically what the book is focused on and what the book is about. Is what our job is as people who love liberty is we need to start creating an environment where people don't have to ask permission. This is the most important thing, where someone can walk into this and they can start a business or do whatever it is for their personal development. Obviously, like substances that are consciousness expanding substances, whether that's psychedelics, whether that's marijuana, these things, if made illegal and criminalized, they hurt society overall. Because the vast majority of people who have experiences with marijuana, who have experiences with psychedelics, will tell you, every single one of them, I'm a better person for having had that experience. I'm not a better person for just simply have never, whether they liked it or didn't like it, who they are as a person evolved and their consciousness evolved and they're a better person because of it. All of these things, particularly I think for business, and so that's the reason why Bitcoin is so important. That's the reason why the blockchain is so important. We're going through right now. It's so ironic that we're going through with Cointext right now sort of getting all of our companies securitized so that we can take on some venture capital. And that's a good thing. That's going to help us to grow and do a lot. But it's like the hoops to jump through, as opposed to like, nah, I'm just going to sell you a token. I'm just gonna sell you a token. You can sell it at any time. This token is going to pay off dividends, and that's the promise of the blockchain. Like, that's always been the promise of the blockchain. Ethereum's not too good for that right now. Ravencoin might be better. Maybe there are some things that can be done on Bitcoin Cash, but that certainly is the direction that we should be going in. And so that's
I can't hear anything you're saying on my end. I don't know if it's my connection or if it's
Really?
it's the feed. Yeah.
I can hear you.
Hold on.
Did you mute me?
No.
Wait, but now you hear me?
Now I hear you. It's like it's cutting in and out.
See, what I think it is, dude, is when it's got since it's on Skype, when it's got that sound running through yours, it cuts off mine. You feel me? So you may
Gotcha.
have to, if you've got steady sound, you may have to mute it. But no. I mean, this is what I'm here to do, dude. Like, I believe that the most important step that we can take for liberty at this moment is to start creating communities where it can be an end-to-end blockchain economy. And the place in the U.S. where that is already happening in a real way on the ground is here in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe more than electing somebody to government or doing anything like that, that's where real change happens, because there aren't any political solutions.
Yeah.
There are only technological solutions. And it's like, as we said, even speech is a technology. It's a technology. What you're not going to just get you're not going to be able to steal from somebody or punch them in the face enough times to be able to tell them a story. Like, you can't tell a story in punches to the face. And you can't give people more opportunity. You can't end poverty with theft and with punches to the face. You can only bring people out of poverty, create a more healthy, more prosperous society, increase the life expectancy of people. The only way to do that is to create an environment where people don't have to ask permission, where people have sovereignty. Because if people have sovereignty, 99.9% of people are good people. They're good people. Yes, you empower the psychopaths as well, but do you really? Do you really empower the psychopaths more than they're already empowered by the state?
Yeah, right now they're probably at the peak of
Dude, did you see the video it was like somebody caught it on their camera phone of this dude handcuffed on the ground, and this cop
I think I've seen it on...
up, and in like Florida, this cop runs up and kicks him in the head. Well, and it's like, you're worried that if there aren't any police, that someone's going to get treated wrong? And it's like, no, man. The people who want to treat you wrong have a place to go to do it, and they do it every day.
Exactly, dude.
They do it every day. So it's about sovereignty. Because, I personally, and you, and I think 99.9% of the people that you run across or that you know, I'm not out not stealing from people because I'm worried because theft is illegal. No.
Mm-hmm.
I could get away with so much theft within a 1 mile radius of this that no one would ever find out about, as could every single person checking this out and every single person listening. That's not the reason you're not stealing. It's not. It's not. It's not the reason you're not out assaulting people. It's not the reason that you're not out just driving down the street in a car. No. You wouldn't just drive down the street in a car and shoot people. It has nothing to do with laws.
Mm-hmm.
It has everything to do with who you are. But even more importantly, when you have a society where everyone has to take responsibility for themselves, when everybody has sovereignty, you have a vested interest. All that time that you're devoting to working as a slave so that you can pay income tax to the tax farmers who run your government of your country, no, you would spend a fraction of that time thinking about, okay, yes, there are psychopaths out there. And yes, the police are not around. There are no police. There's no violent coercion force. No, first, the police didn't protect you from the psychopaths anyway. But once you get over that myth, it's like, then you start actually talking to your neighbors. Because
crazy,
you
dude.
have a vested interest in defending each other's shit. Like, you defend mine, I'll defend yours. I don't even know my neighbors' names.
Well, and we talked about this, I think it was right after New Year's, where we talked about like the fear that is created with this. And think about, like, for those that are listening, think about when a cop is behind you and you're driving your car. What happens?
Worst feeling, dude.
You disconnect
Yeah.
because you go into fear mode
Yep.
for nothing. Because there's
Well,
an
not for
authority.
nothing. Not for nothing.
Well, yeah,
Because your life is in
True.
danger.
right. Yeah.
Your
Good
life
point.
your
Good point.
life
Glad
is
you
in
caught
danger.
that.
Like, this is how people die.
Mhm.
Right? Like, that's one of these, don't take it lightly. That people don't, the same people who will be like, "Oh, those cops are there to protect and serve. Oh, you shouldn't even be nervous if you haven't done something wrong. Don't worry about it." Well, people who haven't done anything wrong get killed by cops. And at a much higher rate, like per traffic stop, than the number of people who die in, say, plane crashes, as versus the number of people who ride in airplanes on a daily basis. But yet, no one is like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't even be the least little bit nervous about getting into that can and flying into the sky." No, of course, everybody's at least got a little something in the
Right.
back of their head. If you don't, you're either drunk or crazy. So that's why I'm usually drunk at that point. You know what I mean? Because I'm not crazy. But think about it. Like, people really do, bad things really do happen to people who haven't done anything wrong. They really do.
And I think, what we talked about with right after that New Year's show too is like, if it's not the person that has the authority doing it, the person that has the authority is creating that energetic like release of like fear and low vibration, and it starts to create that situation even outside of that.
Yep.
So in other words, like when we're on the strip, the cops were flexing their they're flexing, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Whoa, what the fuck is going on?" And it creates that, and then that's when those things start to happen, because people are in fear, people are in those weird situations where they start to feel uncomfortable and out of control.
And I think that we really take for granted just how impactful. It's kind of like it's like a butterfly effect, right? It's this idea that there's actually a huge impact to ruining somebody's day like that by pulling them over, right? Their adrenaline level has gone up at this point. They're feeling terrible about it. They're replaying it in their head. They've got like a little mini trauma, and then they're taking that into their day. And you don't know
Right.
how many people that's affecting over time. And it's not just that. It's like the DMV, for crying out loud. Right? People being, you think about, there's probably in any given, DMV in a major city, there's probably a few thousand people that move through that DMV every day. Right? I think conservatively, probably a 1,000, let's say, in a place like Vegas, in a place like LA for sure. Those people go to the DMV. You think that really doesn't affect the rest of their day? God forbid that it goes badly there. Right? You really think, never mind the time that it took, but you really think that it doesn't affect the rest of their day and that they don't push that off onto other people? Of course they do. Of course they do. And it's like, can we create a society with technology where none of that stuff is necessary? I believe that we can. I believe
Absolutely.
that we can. In the same way that, like, could you imagine if we were still plowing fields with, like, oxen and cows and shit? Right?
Yeah.
Think about
It's crazy.
how many wasted man hours we would have right now because we have tractors and advanced farm equipment available. And that's That to me is the difference between, and it's why, it's why we've got Cointext, it's why I've been devoted to the blockchain, is it's the beginning of saying we can free humanity, one, just by freeing time up.
Hmm.
And then the privacy aspect of it, which is a huge aspect of sovereignty itself, right? It's just, well, nobody knows what you're. If Uncle Sam doesn't know what you're doing, Uncle Sam can't come after you for it, because that's what it is. That's why people are paying income tax. Nobody who makes money in cash, maybe some people, maybe some true bootlicker out there. But it's like, if you work in an industry where you're even partially paid in cash and that amount is not recorded, I have never met somebody who pays an iota of that, who claims an iota of it, if it's not already recorded.
Hmm.
And so that tells you that the only reason that people are paying is because they're scared of what the consequences will be. Because, oh, this person, this individual, and this group that has all the guns knows that I have this amount of money. They say I owe them this amount of money, and they'll make my life a living hell or put me in a cage
Hmm.
if they don't get their pound of flesh. And how does that ruin someone's day? And where would that money be better spent?
Oh, dude.
I honestly just believe I don't care what you spent it on. Like, if you yourself spent it on hookers and blow, that's way better than it being spent on what we just discussed. Somebody with a gun pulling over one of your fellow citizens to harass them and make their day shitty. Never
Hmm.
mind being spent millions and billions of dollars on weapons of war to kill people in places where you don't even speak their language,
Hmm.
where you don't even know where it's at, that has no chance of ever having any effect on your life, and yet your money is being stolen from you to blow them up.
It's crazy, dude.
Yeah, and you know what? Yes, hookers and blow is better. Yes,
Hmm.
you going and getting high and getting laid is better than somebody getting blown up. Sorry. Yes, it's preferable. Absolutely. And the people who are
Agreed.
like, well, but no, it's going towards roads. Not really. Not
Hmm.
really. Oh, it's going towards sick kids, and it's going. No, not
Well,
really.
have you seen the mess they made out of the fucking roads?
It's
I
That's
mean,
what I'm
Jesus
saying. Not,
Christ.
not really. Not really, because we're talking about trillions of dollars, and
Hmm.
Flint, Michigan's water hasn't been fixed in 5 years. They can't even get the water to flow out that people can even take showers. It's going to blow people up. They have no
Hmm.
problem with that. None. They have no problem with paying endless rows of bureaucrats. And it's like, yes, I do believe people should have a job. Of course. But that's the worst job you could possibly have. There's no, like, you being at the DMV. I'm sorry. If you're a DMV worker watching, probably not. There's probably not too many DMV workers that check the show out. But I'm
I
just
highly
saying,
doubt it.
it's not doing anything positive for the world. Like, you could be a much better individual, even if you're of limited ability. Your
Mhm.
time, look, your
Well,
time would be better spent just reading a book, man.
even if you're making mistakes,
Even
even
if
if
you're
you're,
making mistakes, right? But if you're trying and if you're doing something that you love and you're passionate about, but the only way that we can do that, another thing about it is life is not as expensive.
Mhm.
Simple economics tells you that if you're limiting the supply of income and redistributing it, that naturally everything is going to get more expensive. Everything is going to get more expensive, like on a per person basis, and that's life is not as expensive as it is, and people earn a lot more, right? I was in an all
Mhm.
cash industry for 8 years, and it's like what $100,000 is without the theft part of it is very, very different than what $100,000 looks like if you're getting paid a paycheck.
Well, didn't you break it down like the time involved with that? It would be like what, a
It's
little
three
over
months,
three or
dude.
four
It's about a
months?
quarter. Like
Hmm.
January, if you worked all the way through, basically January, February, and March, you work completely
For
for
free.
free.
It's crazy.
3 months. Think about what you could do in 3 months, dude. Think about all the skills that you could master in 3 months. So that's so that's the breakdown, and that's where I'm at. I mean, it was a long. I ended up having to drive out here from Las
Yeah,
Vegas.
you had a journey, huh?
Dude, well, the movers, like, let me just tell anybody out there, if you're going to move cross country, especially if you're going to do the thing to New Hampshire, really be careful about these movers. You're probably going to have to do it yourself, quite honestly. What I would suggest is this. This is where I messed up. I wasn't smart. I was trying to, I trusted that businesses out there, and I shouldn't have. I should have understood and thought about what the industry is all about. Get a quote from U-Haul on how much it will cost for you to
Hmm.
move your stuff. Call two local moving companies on either end of the trip that have great Yelp reviews and get a quote for them, one to load your house and one to unload your house. Then find out how many miles per gallon the truck gets that you got a quote from U-Haul about. And I guess I lost you on this thing,
Oh
Christian. We'll get
shit.
you back from the that get that quote. Figure out how much it would cost you to do it yourself, and then don't trust a mover who quotes you less than that.
Mm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's gold right there.
Don't trust a mover who quotes you less. And I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that. But because you know
Hmm.
what? What they do is you got a little greedy. And then they'll get some money from you. That's what they ended up doing. They get a deposit, and then it just starts going up and up and up. And it was so funny to me that, like, so I put in this deposit, that it went up a little because they re-estimated the space. And then when I was having a problem with the fact that I was getting like a bait and switch in this situation, the dude was like, "But we're not going to make any money. We if we do it at this cost, we don't even make a profit." Like, and I was like, "Hold on, hold on. Then why did you quote me that price?" Like,
Oh
he
my
was like,
God.
"I've been doing this." It was so funny because he was like, "I've been doing this for 12 years." I was like, "So you've been doing this for 12 years and you still quoted me a price where you wouldn't make any money? Dude, this what a scam." You know?
Hmm.
A literal scam. So, that was one thing, but it was great. It was a great, like, 6-day trip. I just drove 8 hours a day, took my time, and thought a lot, listened to a whole bunch of podcasts, listened to a whole bunch of Terrence McKenna. Um,
Nice.
yeah, it was good, man. It was a very, very good trip. Boom, got you back shared. We've got
Cool.
what, about 7 minutes,
Yep.
7 minutes to Chris DeRose. I'm very, very excited to get into this with him. How
Yeah, this is
have
gonna be
uh, how
great,
have
man.
things been in Vegas, man? I haven't even asked you. We haven't even really gotten a chance to talk.
They've been good. I've been working a lot. I've been taking on some more web design jobs and stuff like that, and just hustling,
What about
really.
the meetups are still going on? Meetups are
Yeah,
still
the
happening.
meetups are still going good. The so John and I did the last one. It was actually I realized that I do need to do because I went out of town for a while and it kind of threw me off,
Mm.
and I didn't do any videos or do any advertising for this last meetup, so I could definitely see the difference, which actually is a good test. It's good to know that, you know.
I mean, those
So
videos are clutch, man. They're really
yeah.
clutch, and I think that this whole the BCH meetup thing has really it's really become a thing, and it's back to where Bitcoin was, but it's definitely going global. I mean, I get late night tonight. I'm flying to Hong Kong for the CoinGeek.
That's right. Yeah,
Yep, the
cool.
CoinGeek conference, which is I guess it's on the 18th, and a lot of flying, a lot of time in the air,
Hmm.
but it should be good. Doing a little presentation on a panel with the businesses panel. I think who else is on that panel? People from Handcash, Encrypt. I think Ryan Charles might be on that panel from yours.org, but I know that he's also giving a presentation. Who else is on there? The guys from CentBee, I think, might be on that panel as well. Really, really a lot of cool innovation in the space. And I've also been, recently, since I've been here, interesting to note, Dash is by far the most, there's a lot of businesses. There's hundreds of businesses, especially you go to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Man, I've been out. I actually got a chance to have lunch a couple times with Joel Valenzuela, who's with Dash Force News, and we went out and he was showing me all the places. He was like, "So we'll go here, we'll get lunch, paid with Dash. Got some beers, paid with Dash."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's dope, dude. You just walk down the street.
When I was coming back from Florida, there was advertisements on the airplane for Dash.
Dude, this is the governance model, right? This is their. It's very interesting. I've become intrigued by it. The fact that the blockchain itself is able to do some marketing. We'll talk more about Dash. I'll probably have Joel on at some point. It works. Turns out that it works. I mean, from a standpoint of a wallet, with zero conf and all of that, very, very, very much like Bitcoin Cash. So I think there's a lot, man. There's a lot more to this technology, and that's basically what we're going to get into with DeRose here. I'm gonna jump on and see if he's available at this point, and then
Cool.
Yeah, sounds good. Why don't we go ahead now and go to break, and then we can come back with Chris DeRose.
Awesome.
And CEO of Bitcoin.com. And nChain's chief scientist, Dr. Craig Wright. Welcome to the dawn of a new era. The age of cryptocurrency is here, and it's changing how we spend and think about money. Just think, VisaNet handles 150 million transactions every single day. That's millions of people at ATMs pulling out cash or swiping their cards. But what if there's a more convenient and secure way of accepting payments? Join us in Hong Kong to find out how you can revolutionize transactions for today and the future.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Nguyen, CEO of nChain Group, and your host for this one-of-a-kind payments and Bitcoin commerce event. We're bringing together the biggest minds in Bitcoin to show us a better way to accept payments and send money.
Presentations from Jihan Wu, CEO of Bitmain, the world's foremost Bitcoin mining hardware. Roger Ver, the first major investor in Bitcoin startups and CEO of Bitcoin.com. And nChain's chief scientist, Dr. Craig Wright, as well as many more movers and shakers in the field. Find out how you can integrate blockchain into your business by registering for the CoinGeek.com conference today.
The spirit of art. The spirit of technology. The spirit of individuality. Baby Vodka. An ultra-premium spirit conceived by Vin Armani. Handcrafted and distilled in Las Vegas by master distiller George Rotz. Each bottle, a celebration of the individual, custom engraved and hand-signed by the creators. Each element blending in harmony to create a beautiful experience beyond imagination. Baby Vodka, the spirit of Vegas. Created by Vin Armani. Tailored by Christian Rays. Available for purchase exclusively with cryptocurrency at babyvodka.com.
Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani, also on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. We are proud members of the Activist Post Podcast Network, so you can check out all of our audio archives at activistpost.com. Well, we are going to get into our guest, but before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about Countermarkets. At countermarkets.com, trends and strategies for maximum freedom. So we are in our, what is this? This is May. If you have not gotten your first issue, you can go and do that for free at countermarkets.com. I actually am really, really proud of this particular issue because in it, I am telling a story that I had to wait a little while to tell because there was a court case involved, but it was an epic agorist battle between myself and the city of Las Vegas, which just recently ended in probably the most anticlimactic way that it possibly could have, but the story is really good. And I'm doing it serialized, like the old school serialized crime novels. So this is a little bit of a libertarian victimless crime novel, as you could say, serialized. And so we've got the first episode in this edition of Countermarkets. People have said that they like it. The next edition, or the closing, will be the 2-year anniversary of this thing actually going down, which happened in June, and that'll be in the next issue. But there's a ton of other great content in there as well. So I would advise you to go and check it out, countermarkets.com. And when you are ready to subscribe, of course, we take crypto, and we also take PayPal and credit cards. We'll take your dirty fiat, your bank money as well. So to talk about maybe why dirty fiat is on its way out in a big historical way, amongst other things. We'll see what we get into. Let's get into a little discussion with our guest today, Chris DeRose. Chris DeRose is a Bitcoin evangelist, public speaker, podcaster, and journalist. He's the host of Bitcoin Uncensored, which is a wide-ranging and insightful look at the people, projects, and culture of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. Chris DeRose, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Hey, thank you so much, Vin, for having me. This show is growing, and I'm very impressed.
Well, it's growing like at a distance. We're totally, we're doing the decentralized thing, dude. Like we're everywhere. We're in every. I don't know how much. Well, we still got a lot of resources too. You know what I mean? So we may as well take the block size up on the show as well. So I think we're ready to go, dude. So what I want to talk with you about. You interview so many people on your show. You're fantastic at it, breaking down the issues. I think you're probably the most knowledgeable person on the widest range of issues in the space that's out there. What I wanted to talk with you about, I want to get into a little bit of. Well, let's do this. I want to get into this whole religion discussion that's been going on, and I want to give you a chance to break down what this means, because you interview people, but you don't get always get the chance to really put your own have your own time to rant or to explain, and 140 characters doesn't really do it justice. So maybe if we could start so that people understand, the people who are speaking with you, because I found that the only way that you can really get this discussion is you have to get a little deeper than just being a user of the currency, a user of the technology. You got to get into the tech itself, do some development, start dealing with projects, all of that. You've had a strong background in this space, but beyond the content side. Maybe could you break down for us just a little bit your background in terms of Bitcoin, in terms of encountering this technology, what you've done, and then I want to get into the broader discussion of where you see this whole thing really going.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. It's very nice to receive those. So I've been in this space for a very long time by most people's standards. I got in 2011, and you can see in my earliest contributions, I would lecture on technical matters in the space. And I came from a computer programming background, and that's where I kind of cut my chops in blockchain. But I took that as far as I could go, and seemingly there was a lot that I could not explain about what was happening in this space. And as I started to venture out a little bit, you find that there's like a multidisciplinary approach to this thing that is called blockchain. And I was finding more solutions to common problems outside of the computer science realm. And that's pretty obvious, I think, to most people. I think that economics is the first go-to that you'll land in terms of a field to understand what's going on. You might get into finance. And those will definitely answer questions that were unanswered. But there are still an entire class of beliefs that are held by people that are instigating action, instigating price, instigating movements of all kinds that can't be attributed to economics or finance or computer science. And so I'm reticent to ascribe that field as religion. Mostly because I don't think that that's fair to do to people of a traditional religious background. But what's certain is that there is a lot of faith involved. So I understand the religious context. But it goes so deep. I think that, and you probably appreciate this, but the lines between what a religion is, what a nation is, are very blurry. You start to get into this notion of social fact, wherein it's entirely a matter of belief. It's not a scientific fact. And that's where we're at, I think, in the blockchain space, and probably where we've been for a long time. And we get into these notions of identity and totemic beliefs and what it is that is happening here. And we can go into that at greater depth.
So let's talk about this the faith aspect of this, because I find this so pop back here and see if I can there. Yeah, it says we're in the new studio. No, I find it so fascinating because, you know, this we were talking earlier, Christian and I, the fact that we are even dealing with this technology, it really is a miracle. It's not in any way a foregone conclusion that we would have wound up in this year in human history with the particular technology that we're dealing with when we talk about the blockchain, when we talk about what Bitcoin is. And then even had it been introduced, it's not a foregone conclusion that it would have been picked up in the way that it is, right? That it wouldn't have just vanished. There's a lot of great, especially software, ideas and concepts that have come up with and just are languishing somewhere, you know, in some university hard drive. But it could now be something fantastic. It's so interesting that almost miraculous aspect of this has been lost on so many people, that we're in a state where, like, and it's a historicity thing where people are already blocking off into tribes. You talk about this a lot. There's already this level of tribalism. People are blocking off into these tribes, and yet it's so young. It's so young, but people want to and it's that faith. They want to stop it where it's at. I mean, are you seeing that? And can you comment on that? How does that strike you, that we're dealing with this very young technology? You've been a part of projects that were even trying to seeking to push it much further than it is. Even all of those have not been fully implemented, and yet people are wanting to stop this thing. It's just I don't know. It strikes me as strange. What are your thoughts on why that might be?
Yeah, I have many thoughts. This whole phenomenon has become a movement, and you know, my guess is, as an adult, when these movements start, it's not obvious where they end, and sometimes they can be flashes in a pan. But this having gone on for almost 10 years now, we're getting close to that. It's clearly not a Beanie Baby thing. And I've watched as new people come and they find things that speak to their identity, to speak to their struggle. And it seems as if what's happening is probably sociological, in terms of like what the sort of umbrella field might be of study. And even within that, it may even be either its own discipline. I don't know. Nonetheless, we're at a point where I think in society, people's allegiances are being questioned in ways that they hadn't been questioned before as a result of the internet. And like you said, like this happened at the right time. And it's hard to say exactly, but it might be that the internet has, through Facebook and social media and elsewhere, expanded into a demographic now where a large contingent of the population have come to a set of beliefs about the world for which traditional identities are not assisting them navigate. It could be that religion, for some people, in the conventional sense, isn't doing enough of the job. It could be that patriotism isn't doing enough of the job. And so some component of the need is now finding its way in this thing called blockchain, which is sort of under the rubric of money, but money is sort of under the rubric of faith as well. So it's hard for me to dice it up, where in the hierarchy this need goes, if it's either below money or not. But as evidenced by the relative dearth of people that are actually using blockchain for commerce, my suspicion is that the blockchain identity supersedes a lot of the economic concerns in 2018.
Yeah, let's talk about that, man, because that one is super weird to me, right? Especially having, as of late, participated in, the Bitcoin Cash community, which was really by default, just because of the particular projects that I was working on at the time. Just I could not, because there were things like micropayments, fees needed to be really low, that I just was like, well, I built these libraries for Bitcoin. I guess I'll have to move them on to something else that's more appropriate as the fees got higher and higher. And even when they were just $1 or whatever, and now they're back to like 20 cents, but still doesn't necessarily work for these projects. So I was like, I can easily switch it over to Bitcoin Cash. Let's see if it works. Okay, cool, it works. But then at the same time, here comes this community, and I'm about to fly off to Hong Kong for this CoinGeek conference, which is supposed to be all about Bitcoin commerce. People are coining phrases and coining, BCom, okay? But where's the commerce? And then I moved out to New Hampshire and touched down in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. You can actually walk around and pay in crypto, and yet nobody cares about Bitcoin Cash there. Like, they're talking about Dash, for crying out loud. Like, the merchants all take Dash. And I'm like, wait a sec. We're so outside of what reality actually is when we're discussing the use as money. Like, we're not even starting in reality. And yet people are taking these sides and saying, oh, we'll wait for this to happen, wait for this to happen, wait for this to happen. Where is the reward? This is what I'm wondering. Like, I get it from the people who are, let's say, in the space as content creators, right? Or as speakers, or perhaps own an interest in a company, or are running a company, or are trying to start a company, or are doing an ICO. Okay, you see where it comes from. But those don't seem to be the people who are the true believers of any of these things. It seems to be these people who maybe hold a little bit, and then, like, where is the reward? What is it that these people are in for? What is it that you're seeing on that side?
Yeah, so I can give you a simple answer. Okay. I don't know that this gets into as much detail as you'd like, but it seems to me that these communities are matters of allegiance for people, in the sense that in comporting with a community's values, they then have a social standing that is beneficial to them. It validates their existence. It tells them that they are a functioning member of a larger system, and that larger system is their peers in this blockchain group. That's the simplest answer I can give you. And there's a lot of motivational things that go with that get way more complex. But I've seen this time and time again where somebody will buy something or engage in commerce in a way that actually costs them more money, time, frustration, etc. And they then purchase a thing where they achieve some method of economic efficiency. And the virtue that they've acquired, the validation that they've received, is as a result of that process of, deassociating from the conventional, or the quote-unquote perceived conventional community, and then associating with a blockchain group. And I've seen it time and time again. And even in the earliest days, we had this notion of the fiat leak, which was this effect, I think, of people who are opting out of fiat into a blockchain community. And there's a lot of cynicism around that effect that I understand, but it doesn't, for me, it's like not at all cynical. For me, it's very much hearkening to earlier days in society when you found yourself belonging in a way that was wholesome, that was perpetuating, that was fairly like solid in almost every way that I think most people care about. And like there's this funny thing going on, and I think Bitcoin Cash gets into the heart of this. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's almost like people need some degree of faith. They need some degree of greater purpose in life than their typical workday will allow. And I think with prior generations, they would go to religions, or they would go to unions, or they will go to these types of establishments. And then for millennials in the modern era, there hasn't been anything like that online until blockchain. And obviously, it must be said that the growth has created a snowball effect such that by joining this community, one receives money through their investment, which is then used to validate the wisdom of their decision in their fiat their fiat identity, and then that kind of compounds and rolls. It keeps on going, and they then, having secured validation, either double down or get their friends to jump in, or just like stay the same, but at least have received some fill of the void that brought them there in the first place. So that appears to be what I'm seeing as a whole, and I think that's good.
I want to dive into this because I think that it gets at, I think what both of us are talking about when we make this comparison, because I've made it as well with with religion. It's not that what's happening in the blockchain space, in the social space, right, in the meat space. It's not like what's happening there is religion. It's that what's happening there and what happens in religion come from the same, are motivated by the same human impulse or the same human instinct. And whether that's an instinct to belong, whatever it is, and it does make sense that it is this perfect storm of consumerism, right? So it's like we've got a few generations raised in this hyper consumerism. We've certainly seen consumerism as being a sort of a bridge for people and being a place where they could come together in terms of community, right? We all buy this particular brand. That makes us this, right? We saw it with the old Apple Mac ads and all of that. I feel like a lot of that has gone away now, right? Especially when you've got like iPhones in everybody's hands, and it's like people are choosing, do I want an iPhone or do I want an Android? It's really like, it's not brand loyalty. It's really about like, oh, which one? I'll try them out. This one I think it's better, but they're basically so similar in terms of the apps that they're running and whatnot that it's like, just what user interface do I want? But I do think that it's that perfect storm, because what you're consuming, and this is one of the favorite pieces that I think that you've written, is even blowing up the idea that like you own Bitcoin. No. You're purchasing UTXOs, and most of the people who are involved in it don't even understand that it's like you have nothing. It's lit. Yes, it works because of the faith involved. Because we all have faith, we can trade these things around for value and use them as a store of value, but it's nothing. For the first time, it's really the ability to purchase nothing. Like, it's worse than a pet rock. So do you think that the fact that it is so ethereal, the fact that it is so otherworldly, is what gives it the same type of staying power and the same type of internal momentum that gods have, that a religion has? Do you think that's part of it?
Man, I love this show. It's great to come on a place where we can have these types of conversation without having to cower in fear
right.
over the ramifications of the words, Like, God, it's so rare these days. Yeah, so these are great questions, and obviously nobody has the answers, but I think that there's a few things that came into play. I think that, consumerism, I wonder to the degree, because we're at this like structuralism meets postmodern phase, I guess, in our development. And I get the groans because like postmodernism is a bit trendy, fine,
right.
And there's sensitivities to that. But like it has to be said that I think in the structuralist paradigm, there wasn't a lot of ability to explore spiritualism. There wasn't a lot of ability to explore religion at all.
Right.
In fact, I was like antithetical to that whole movement, as best I can tell. And like the problem I have with structuralism now is that anything that structuralism doesn't account for is quote unquote stupid. That's it. There's no like predictive capacity at the wall, at the border that is stupid. And when something is assessed as stupid, it's no longer part of the worldview for people in a structuralist way. And that's not the way the world works for a bunch of reasons. One, I don't accept that quote unquote being stupid is necessarily a foul. Like, you know, we have children and they're marvelous and they're kind of fucking dumb, but they're awesome, you know? And, like,
so true.
I don't know. I have like a grandfather, you know, who he's gone now. He wasn't like a stellar performer in like some academic sense, but I'll be damned if he wasn't one of the most important people in my life. And, and like to characterize him as stupid is certainly unflattering, but also like doesn't get at the heart of what he offered to the universe. Like he didn't set out to be an academic. He just set out to be a great person, and he achieved that. And so I think that like the failings of structuralism left people out. And these were, in some cases, sure, bad people, but in some cases, the best people. And you know, I think we had like, we probably go in the opposite way to a fault in some ways. Like, okay, so we had this sort of like rational world, and the hedonistic treadmill maybe is what bound us, such that like the Joneses had a new car, therefore I will acquire a new car, and then I got the car, and now I've received validation socially, and we move on to the next round. And nowadays, I guess there's this virtue component that is probably an analog in the sense that the Joneses have achieved some recognition for some virtuous act, therefore I must do a virtuous act, and then the cycle repeats itself. It seems like that could be going on. And perhaps if that's a greater narrative, blockchain fits into that theme. Perhaps. The whole blockchain phenomenon is a reflection, it's like a little microcosm of society.
Right.
And that's no coincidence. I think that these are de facto internet communities, so that should be the case.
So okay, so let's dig into the virtue side, because I know that this has been something that I don't think a lot of people understand your message on this. Let's talk about so here we have this technology that is there's no politics on it. Any politics is something that we attach. It's not even interacting. These networks could care less whether or not there are even humans on the other side. Right? And eventually it won't be. Eventually there'll be a lot of machines making these transactions. You know, your self-driving Uber that you pay is going to be paying for gas at the automated pump and you know, so a lot of this is not even going to be human beings. And yet we see so much virtue signaling inside of this community, in the human facing side, in the meat space side of this community. It's full of virtue signaling for something that has no... Is it because it's a blank slate? Is it because you can fill in the blanks however you want? It's been a frustration for me, and maybe we could talk about some of the Bitcoin Cash stuff. I'm happy to talk about my frustrations with that particular side of the space, because I see it, and I even mentioned it in a tweet today, where I said, look, and people get angry at me because I'm rough on the merchant adoption. You know, I get on people that's like, you know, Calvin Ayre sponsored a soccer team in Scotland, they're Ayre United. They've got BCH on the front of their jerseys. They offered their jerseys for sale online. They don't take crypto. They don't even accept Bitcoin Cash. Right? And so I was like, what? You know, there's a huge amount of hypocrisy there. And this is the same guy, and thank him for flying me out. That's fantastic, and I'm participating, and I am all about creating merchant adoption. But the same person who this week is going to be doing the BCom conference, which is all about merchant commerce. And I'm like, there's so much virtue signaling by the same individuals who are demonstrably not doing the thing that they are virtue signaling about. It happens a lot. It does happen a lot in BTC, but it happens so much in BCH. People who are more excited about sending Bitcoin Cash to Venezuela than they are about convincing the locally owned pizza place down the street to accept Bitcoin Cash so that they can buy pizzas from them. You know what I mean? So where is it? Because it's a blank slate? Is it because we can put whatever we want onto these networks that it allows this type of behavior, this virtue signaling?
Yeah, so virtue signaling is a real problem, and there's a few facets to it. It stems from a very positive idea, like most most terrible outcomes.
Right.
The positive idea, I mean, it's been described in many different ways. Like Durkheim referred to it as a social fact at the turn of the 19th century. This notion that a thing is true not because science says it's true, but because people say it's true.
Right.
So, like, an easy example would be like a nation's borders or something. Like, where is Canada? That's not a fact of the universe. That's not a science-based process. That is something that we as humans collectively decided was true. And just because of that, that's why it's true. That's it. No other reason. Best I can tell. Obviously, there's a whole path down that road,
Sure.
but that's the summary. So, given that premise, then it could be said that we can alter the outcomes of society if we just believe, which sounds absurd, but it's been described in many different ways. The Tinkerbell effect is, I think, what it was traditionally called as a sort of colloquialism in Western countries. It was then, I think, codified in a financial context by George Soros under the label reflexivity.
Reflexivity, yeah, we've covered that on the show. Yeah.
Right. So, like, that's where virtue signaling works well, is when we as a society decide that there's this thing that we want to achieve, and if we just all believe in it, then it'll come true. Great. And that is usually the motivation that you see behind the worst forms of virtue signaling as well. These hypocritical forms where people are, at least in their mind, starting up that long hill of making a belief come true. And even if it's not in concordance with the reality that we live in, it's worth doing, because if we just get enough people to do this with us, then it'll satisfy itself. I think that's kind of the summary of what's going on there. I begrudge virtue signaling, despite playing with it, certainly in an ironic sense, if not even a literal sense at times. But it's something that should be used sparingly. And unfortunately, it seems to me that it's becoming a de facto approach to problem solving, and that is not good. That is very problematic. And I think what you're seeing is, like, yeah, in these blockchain communities, in their mind, the hope that they rally around is that this system will replace credit cards. So if we just start talking about it like everyone's doing it, then everyone will start doing it. And then that problem will, they don't know that they're even necessarily processing at this level. It's kind of like a sociological function. But and you get into shared consciousness as well when you get into this a bit. The idea that humans are maybe not best understood individually sometimes, but maybe are best understood as a single organism that is a society. And so perhaps the individuals who are virtue signaling, all they understand is that this is their function in a greater whole. They may not understand how that greater outcome works. So yeah, I think that's what you're seeing with a lot of these virtue signaling initiatives. And I resist them for a lot of reasons. I think that they can be harmless, they can be harmful. The trick to ideologies that everybody forgets is you take the parts that work when they work, and you don't become an orthodox believer. And unfortunately, that's where it always gets very, very difficult, is where to draw that line.
So let's talk about orthodoxy then, because I do think that that's a huge part of this overall discussion. It's a brand new technology, but I think that it's already... And everybody on all sides accepts the fact that, for instance, BTC is the orthodoxy. Every single person on any part of, whether they like it or not, that's the orthodoxy. I wonder, are these individual technologies combined with that sort of, and I don't even know how it's sprung up and it's become de facto true that it's an orthodoxy. Do you think that these technologies are shaping those communal consciousnesses, plural? Do you think that the technology itself is shaping them? And do you think that we could approach a place where this thing is completely out of control of even the humans involved? Like, I see Bitcoin maximalism. That's why I'm fascinated by this idea. It almost feels like an immune system when you interact with it. It feels like and that these aren't even thinking humans necessarily, that they're operating on a very good program that's clearly been put there. It does feel like these networks are becoming organisms that are utilizing our sort of organic material to get the job done in the physical world. I mean, do you think that Do you think that it's a foregone? Do you see that happening? And then do you think that it's a foregone conclusion that these networks may end up controlling human beings in the ways that, for instance, religions over time have controlled human beings?
Yeah, excellent question. And I do think about this a lot. I don't know that, again, anybody really knows the answer, but it's a great thing to talk about. So there's this notion of totemic belief that a given community circles around a totem, but that the totem itself might be the community. It's not actually the individuals per se. It is the shared hope that is the community. And you see this in Aborigine societies where perhaps the founding belief is a god of the tree or the god of the mouse or some such thing. And this becomes the first principle of the tribe. And if that is then your first principle, you start from that point and then you create narratives that justify, that promote, and that validate the identity that you circle around principally. And I see this happening with Bitcoin, and it happens in a number of ways. So, for example, Bitcoin isn't growing, like in terms of its feature set, in terms of it's growing in many, to be clear, it's growing in many awesome ways. It's growing financially, it's growing in support and all that, but it isn't growing in like a feature set term. It is like very set in its ways. It's not going to grow a lot. We're doing Lightning, and that's a major feature, and it's awesome. But it's not like you're adding, Turing complete smart contracts, and then that's great. I don't think it should. It's not like you're adding fungibility. Again, I think it's great. I don't think it should. But rather than consider a world where those features could be interesting or could be fun or could be any number of things, because your first principle is that Bitcoin is your center, then you must create a narrative whereby the universe doesn't need, want, or hold any sort of accountability of those ideas. And I think the orthodoxies, when they become problematic, are when they start to fight creativity and really engage in denial and fight science even. And I see a good bit of that in the Bitcoin community. But it's always hard for me now as like a pundit of sorts, because I don't know what the right thing to do is. It's like, as a journalist, I should be explaining this to the audience in the way that seems very obvious, given my time and specialization. But at the same time, if I elucidate this, if I show everybody, like, okay, well, this is clearly what's happening, and we're like, oh, yeah, that's definitely what's going on, you then destroy the degree of reflexivity that is propping and buttressing this belief, meaning the individuals who are circling around this idea may, in fact, have a moment of clarity and stop circling. And I get that concern. So it's a hard thing to discuss and really identify, because it's almost like the opposite of the Tinkerbell effect, where like if you don't believe, then it falls flat. And it's a real challenge in the space, which this is a little bit more of an autobiographical sort of.
Go ahead, please.
But I think that it sort of addresses your point as to like what the hell's going on in the space. And Bitcoin Cash gets into the heart of it too. I am so happy Bitcoin Cash came around, and not for the reasons that like people want to allege.
Let's hear it.
Like,
Let's hear it.
Yeah. It's not that like I don't like Core. I love Bitcoin Core. It's not that I have like some conspiracy agenda or something like that. It's that I can come up with so many reasons why Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash are greater parts of a whole, why they work together, why there is no reason for antagonism, really. Yet, those two communities are headbutting like none other in the space. And I think that this sort of contrast between what should be inclusive and what's seemingly divisive is a great learning point for all of us in this space on how communities work, how blockchains may or may not be communities, and on and on. So it's like this great data point that came into the space that split everything in half, and now like in the pieces of like the sort of collision, we can start figuring out how this whole thing was composed. So I like Bitcoin Cash for that reason, if nothing else.
I mean, it has been fascinating, and I guess it's at least entertaining to be participating in that space. I mean, I had given up, like I say, I had kind of given up on Bitcoin just for the particular. I've got so much time in the day, and I've got particular projects that were interesting to me, and I was like, this is not going to happen on this particular blockchain. So, but it was like, but I had been in love with Bitcoin ever since I first encountered it, and I still am. Like, I do believe that it is nothing else interests me. Ethereum doesn't interest me. Dash has interested me a little bit, certainly just because of the fact that, like empirical evidence that as soon as I step down in the place where people are actually using this thing, here's the one that they're using. I'm still trying to figure out why that is. Like, I'm still trying to fully understand why that is. Like, it's not just all the marketing that's being thrown at it. It's something else. Like, I don't know. Like you say, is it a community? Like, is it just particular to this region? And what does that mean? Is that, repeatable somewhere else? Can you replicate it? Where do you see... we're talking about these two sides, right? We're talking about the adoption side of it. And, you've got people right now at Consensus. There's tons of people. A lot of that is about adoption. A lot of that is about the technology behind it. We're here having a broader discussion. It's not even a broader discussion. It's a discussion about something completely different, right? It's about a technology, or it's about two aspects of this technology that may or may not necessarily even be connected to one another, right? It's the part of the technology that's closer to the technology of religion, because clearly religion is a technology. It's been something that's been able to take thousands and thousands of people, millions of people over history, and get them to do crazy shit for the people who were in charge of the religion, right? That otherwise these people would not have done, completely against their self-interest. I wonder what you think as we see this side noticeably growing, the physical world technology growing. I almost feel as though what's really going to end up making history is this other side that we're talking about, and yet people are remiss to talk about it. So I want your opinion on which one of these is really the most important as a prediction for in your own mind, and then why people are so scared to talk about the aspect of this thing, even the people who are deeply. And I see the fear, especially when, you'll post something that's a fantastic insight, and I'll see the fear of people in the space. Why are people so afraid to talk about this most powerful point of it as we see it as well?
Yeah. So a bunch of good stuff in there. The fear is palpable, and I don't know what's wrong with me. Let's be real, but I don't get afraid in the way that a lot of people do. And there's a few things that work there. A lot of the fear is that I think people know that they didn't reason their way to a belief when they hear one, and then they're confronted with a number of emotions. They're confronted with the fear that the belief may have been unsound, that their identity now is on shaky ground. The fear is that there will be social change, that there will be a hierarchy change in the society as a result of this information. They fear that the hope that they share with their friends will be mitigated in a way that causes them to lose those friendships and those structures. So it's understandable. A lot of it too has to do with the degree to which they can understand intent. So for me, I'm fairly unequivocal about my secularism. Mm-hmm. I'm not even proud of that, quite honestly, but it's been the most useful to me when navigating the space, in terms of my ability to be as impartial as at least I can try to be. And so I think with me, people don't always know where the motivation lies. So there's a degree then of an inability to understand the idea, a fear of the new idea, and a question of allegiance. Mm. And then on top of all of that, then the person who's receiving this information has to now deal with the shame of not being able to articulate these concerns. They found themselves in a room, conceivably, where they have to answer, and they are afraid that the answers that they give will be shameful answers that will cause them a loss of status, friendship, shared hope, etc. And I get all of that, but I think that in our modern world, there is a need to have these high-level discussions somewhere, and I don't know where that place would be if not on internet and channels like yours and such. So that's a big part of the background. I think too, when you come out with ideas, you really you see this. You're a content producer. somebody has to specialize in bringing the news to the market. Like, I'm not a bright guy, really. I just know where to look for ideas, and then I know how to apply them. And then the specialization that you and I offer is our ability to present these ideas in a packaging that is conducive to consumption. And that's a real challenge depending on how deviant the idea is. And like, you see this throughout history where like great scientists are met with huge backlashes over what was this. You never ever like think about these ideas in like the scientist's head. You know, you look at like, I don't know, Crick or Galileo or these types of guys, you know, and it's like, okay, for them, yeah, they are great men for all kinds of reasons, but they just discovered something. Like in their particular mind, that thing intersected with them. It wasn't like them inventing anything. It was them like measuring something. And so then they come to the market and they're like, oh, look at this. We figured out that, like, you know, the sun is not this, the Earth is not the center of the solar system. And it's like, he's not the one who set that up. He's just the guy who figured that out. Right. And then the community is like making him answer to the configuration that he had nothing to do with. So I mean, that's the job, I think, of a journalist in a lot of ways is to deal with that kind of stuff. And it's really hard in a space where faith is as pronounced as it is. That's really, like, in computer science, like, you come in, you find something rote, and either it works or it doesn't, and it's no big deal. Here, it's like defiling the gods if you're wrong. And it's been interesting. It's very, it works both ways. It's like, it's really disappointing sometimes when, like, either you get it wrong or you didn't get as good as you could have gotten it. But then there's other times when it's like, well, this is a new field maybe, and this is the risk reward ratio. Like, the reality is like, a lot of us in blockchain may not be the most talented people, but we came to a space that was underserved and we were able to make a big difference really fast. And that's how that goes, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but that's a big part of it.
I think it brings up a question of, do you feel then that Bitcoin is an invention, or is Bitcoin a discovery? Is it stumbling across? We're obviously seeing its mimetic value, right? It's this mimetic vortex, really. Like, it hooks you with the meme and it drags you in. And the people that I'm seeing dragged into this space, many of them are not the people that I would expect. And a lot of them, weirdly enough, I was just listening to Jeffrey Tucker talking about some friend of his who she had been hanging around in the space, going to meetups, going to conferences, the whole thing, had never even downloaded a wallet. She was a no-coiner. But yet she was sucked. It's got some mimetic value. Is it an invention, or is it a discovery? Because it has to have that mimetic value. It had to have that mimetic value in order for it to do what it was invented to do. And I think there are just very few inventions, I think, that have captured. Do you kind of get? Do you see what I'm getting at in this case?
I go back and forth on this. I've thought about this a lot, actually. I think proof of work is an invention, and I think Bitcoin itself might be a discovery. And I think what might have happened here was that Satoshi Nakamoto figured out a way to convert registered value, dollars in your name, into a fungible value, a Bitcoin. You burn your dollars, and now you have this number that is scarce. And I think that was the invention. And then I think that the discovery was like the latent identity need that people seem to have had in this online frontier that wasn't being served by traditional governments and religions. I think that's where I'm at now. I may change my mind on that in another year, but that seems to be my current belief.
Okay, so to end this out, to be a little controversial, you explain this well, and people ask me, and they come to me and they ask, why am I no longer hot on Ethereum? For a while I thought that I was. Can you help us to understand, because Ethereum is not Bitcoin, right? There are a lot of crypto enthusiasts who watch the show, but who maybe aren't the most technical. And I know that you have, in terms of smart contracts, you have a very deep background. Can you explain to those people who are watching this why Ethereum is not Bitcoin in the way that we are describing it, why it's not that technology, and why it's not going to be potentially the savior of the rest of finance in the same way that Bitcoin has a chance to perhaps be the savior of money in the pocket.
Yeah. So I have a long and sordid history with Ethereum, and I'll skip over the bulk of it. I think at the present state of things, I'm very bearish on this notion of the Turing complete smart contract. I don't think we need it. I think that the Turing completeness has achieved very little at very high cost. And I think that the reason it caught on was because as amoral, it comported with the original notion that we could solve our legal problems if we were just deterministic.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very like structuralist idea, that the nuances of belief and intent were irrelevant, and that rationale and science is the way to resolve disputes and such. And that was what was posited, I think, in the 90s through Ricardian contracts and such. And while there may very well be a very fixed scope of solution that applies to, I think that the types of problems that we're finding in this space, as evidenced by the DAO, are more systemic than that notion would allow for. So you look into the failings of the DAO. That was a huge systemic risk. It could have, and kind of did, frankly, corrupt the entire system.
Sure it did.
Certainly in a proof of stake model, if not just socially and on and on and on. So I think that Ethereum came out of a time when that comprehension was minimal, the data was unclear, and it ran most of its course. Now we're getting into systems that are, in my mind, better at what they pretend to do. And my hope would be that we actually do see some traction on the Turing complete side, but it's not going to look the way we thought. So like, I don't want to plug any specific project because I try not to shill, but there's a couple good pieces here.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I like what Decred's doing, because Decred, in my mind, is like Bitcoin, but with the governance. Mm-hmm. And so while Bitcoin Cash may offer that, and while Bitcoin Core is Bitcoin Core, and I really like Bitcoin Core principally even, Decred is like a very honest reboot of Bitcoin. It says, look, we're not going to do Turing completeness. We're going to leave it Turing incomplete, but we're going to add more social elements to it, and we're going to see if this works. So I like that approach. Now, on the other side, completely on the other side, but like in the similar sort of vein, there's EOS at this point, which is looking like the Ethereum 2.0, which may or may not be needed, but the approach to governance is as solid as I've seen in any sort of, almost any of these projects, save for maybe Decred. And it seems like the reboot to EOS is going to be able to facilitate a little bit more involvement. It may raise more money, quite frankly, which itself would add a lot of benefits, and on and on. Now, we'll see if regulatory action prohibits this stuff. But in my mind, at its best, if one of these government systems on blockchain works, we can probably expect, I'm just going to say it, blockchain colonization. Oh, it's a crazy word.
This is where I was hoping you'd go with this.
Yeah. Well, you look at like the Arab uprising, the Arab Spring, where like you had all these people, like these people were sold on the reboot, like they were ready to come in, they were going to do things better, and then there was no government. So like they showed up and they were all here and they were all ready, and no one was in charge, and they didn't really have time to get a thing going. And like realistically, like these types of movements require really extreme inputs and planning. And so my hope would be that a project that is blockchain does the governance bit right, so that everything's ready for medium in which to apply it. And like Venezuela would be the obvious case. Like Venezuela really needs better governance right now, and I don't feel uncomfortable saying that. It's just like kind of a shitty government over there right now. Great country, presumably good people. Never met them, but they're people, so they probably are. But we don't have an easy option for extending basic human rights over there in any other way. So like it could be said that this is what ends up happening with this technology, and if that's the case, awesome. But I don't see that level of coherence right now in the Ethereum community.
See, this is why I do think that this type of conversation, where we do make it's not a comparison, where we make at least some reference and parallel to religion. It's like you look at the world's great religions, right? Especially in the West, right? The big three: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Well, Judaism and Islam are governance models baked in. Right? From the half of the religion is governance, You know, Sharia, you've got a judicial system, right? So it really did go down the line, right? But even you know, Judaism started out with judges, right? Like, it's a governance model. That Moses comes down with 10 commandments. It's a governance model. And Christianity, you know, is basically the foundation for the civil liberties that we have in the West now. I mean, that all comes from the Pilgrims, for crying out loud, were wanting, it was about being able to practice Christianity. And so I think that I think that that's a very important, if we don't discuss that aspect, if we don't discuss the aspect that is something like religion, we miss being able to predict and at least being able in some way to control how the blockchain colonization actually shakes out. Because I don't think that any of us want it to shake out with a government-controlled Ripple-style governance that really just only takes the current state and makes it worse, right? So that we get basically like middle of the 20th century repeat, you know, and we've got two blockchain behemoths going after each other and leaving a lot of dead people in their wake. So no, I do appreciate that aspect. Is there anything you'd like to end off with? I would like for you to tell people where they can check you out, because I'm sure our audience will now become your audience.
Well, that would be much appreciated. Let's hit on that last topic just a little bit. Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy on the religion in my mind, but it's not where I think people are looking. Like, I see people who are staunchly rationalist in Bitcoin, oftentimes, who are orthodox, who have no room for faith in their allegation, right? And if you compare this to any faith-based initiative, it is then deemed substandard or some such thing, or inferior, or quote-unquote stupid, really, is the obvious label. And number one, I think that any company in its right mind would love to see the success of a full-fledged religion. Like, it's just, if you went to like IBM or you went to Microsoft and you're like, hey, let's implement a program that'll last 1,000 years. Like, they're going to be like, awesome, I'm in.
Sure.
And so for people that are like in the space that don't see that, it's like, okay, this is not adding up. That's one thing. I think too, the idea that they aren't, like, you don't have the option of not being in a religion of some kind as a person. I don't care what you tell me. The most basic forms of religion are probably just citizenry. It's probably just believing in a thing called the United States, or, you know, whatever your country is, or your continent, your greater tribe. Like, that thing doesn't actually exist outside of social fact. So at some point, religions seem to become social facts, and like we can talk about the existence of God or gods or these types of things, but if enough people believe it, that becomes a functional model from society to build on. So fine, you may not have a notion of God in the sense that he is in the Christian form, but you go to work every day for dollars, which are just spiritual pieces of paper. They've been imbued with the spirit of liberty. That is de facto faith-based thinking. And it's okay, it's good. I mean, these are the pinnacles of society that work really damned well. And I don't think that people are being very honest when they deem these systems inferior. So I like that. And I guess, you know, for me, the real contentions I have on the religious issue is it's a bit premature to declare that level of success. And it's a little bit premature to declare that level of legitimacy.
Fair.
And I say that mostly out of regard to the emotions and sensitivities of people who have been part of a religion that's been around for 1,000 years.
Right.
I can't in good conscience go to that person and say, like, we did it. Like, we're on parity. You know, like, it's just not the way that works. But I think that the pursuit of these tenets are noble. I think that, like, you got to consider, like, I don't know the nicest way to say this, but, like, we get into the notion of the stupid people. And I don't like to characterize people in those terms. Those people may just not be your version of, like, the ideal.
Sure.
But whatever. But, like, people, for whatever reason, are quote unquote stupid. And maybe they're stupid because, you know, they have a 9-to-5 job and they have 2 jobs and they gotta put all their time into it. They don't have time to specialize in Bitcoin. Or maybe, you know, they have kids and they just want to spend their time with the damn kids. Whatever it is. Reductionist comprehension of this space is what allows those people to participate at the level that they can. And it doesn't have to be an assessment of IQ. It doesn't have to be an assessment of like gene quality. It can be an assessment of time availability, and that's okay. So I think that as a community, if we are more respectful of these types of commitment levels, the whole thing will just be way more successful. So like the hypocrisy is around and in weird ways, and I don't know. The aversion to discussion is understandable, but I think that particularly in the Bitcoin orthodoxy side, it is really cannibalizing what would have been greater opportunities. So yeah, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on it. I don't know if you see it similarly or not. But anybody who's watching who wants to come, comment or what have you, obviously come into my show. I try to do audience Q&A towards the end of the shows, and you got something to say, listen and answer it live. And yeah, I mean, as a plug for my show, Bitcoin Uncensored, you can find me on YouTube, chrisderose.com, and that's my deets. Oh, DeRose on Twitter, DEROSE.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you for coming on. I will be obviously interacting with you online. Always interesting. I advise everyone to follow Chris on Twitter because super, super fascinating. This is one I'm going to have to go back and watch again, man. But I'm glad to have you on. I hope to have you on again because I think that this is a very important discussion, and there are very few people having it. So, Chris DeRose, thank you so much for being on, and we will have you on again.
Same, bud. Love your creativity. Love your approach to the space. And this new show format, it's rocking.
Thank you, dude. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
All right.
Christian. There he is.
Yeah.
What's up, Christian?
Coming in?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. How are you?
Great. Yeah, that was a great interview.
Well, we're working through the technical issues. You and I were like going, people don't know, we're going back and forth on the remote desktop. I've got control, that he's got control, that I've got control. Yeah, man, super interesting stuff. And I think that it's worth discussing. This is the most interesting technology. It's more interesting than the internet. The internet had to happen, much in the same way that sort of, you could say that a sort of an idea of mechanics had to happen in order to have the printing press, right? So you had to have the sort of high-level smelting. You had to be able to, create interchangeable parts and those sorts of things, which really came from the printing press. But the printing press, I do think that the blockchain and Bitcoin in particular is the most exciting and important thing that has happened to humanity since the printing press. And the printing press changed religion too. There would be no Protestantism without the printing press. That's what took the power away from the Catholic Church. So it's super interesting. Chris is a great guy. Everybody go and check him out. Well, I think we're pretty close to the end of the show, no?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So let me say goodbye to the people then. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you for sitting through. We did pretty good. Minor technical hiccups, but I think this is going to work. And we now have a lot more space to play around with and be creative. The show is going to be, for those who are not watching and who are listening, it should sound pretty similar. But for those who are watching, we're going to really try to make it a treat for you over the coming months. And I can't wait to explore all of the very, very cool concepts and to tell you how things go in Hong Kong, which I am off to at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm leaving the house from here. So with that, we will be back next Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And until then, stay free.